I made the difficult decision to leave my family behind, and surprisingly, I've come to terms with it. Here I am, comfortably settled in my RV parked just outside a cozy cafe, taking advantage of the free internet to type out my thoughts. This journey of leaving wasn't a spur-of-the-moment choice. I mulled it over countless times in my mind. However, I realized that putting pen to paper might help me untangle the complex web of emotions swirling inside me. It's been nearly 6 months since that pivotal day when I stumbled upon the painful truth of my wife's affair. My wife, whom I'll refer to as Eve, was 36 years old, and I was 37. We had a daughter, a vibrant 13-year-old girl. Up until that moment, I was completely oblivious to the betrayal. I always thought our marriage was strong. We shared intimate moments, engaged in deep conversations that lasted for hours, regularly enjoyed date nights, and even pursued individual hobbies together. We were both in good health and maintained a fair level of fitness. It seemed like everything was going well, or perhaps I was just deceiving myself. The revelation that Eve had cheated shattered that illusion, leading me to believe that she must have preferred someone else over me. How could she betray me like that? Did she ever truly love me? I considered Eve my best friend, but clearly I was mistaken. Looking back, I realized I was viewing everything through rose-tinted glasses, genuinely believing that my family cared for me and that I was loved. I was naive, a fool for holding on to that belief. A particular night stands out vividly in my memory. I had come home late from work after attending a safety training seminar. Eve was sleeping on the sofa, and out of curiosity, I glanced at her phone. There were messages filled with emojis, ones I often used when texting her. Confused and concerned, I decided to snoop around and discover the extent of the affair, which had been ongoing for at least 5 months. The other man involved was Adam, a colleague of Eve's from work. I had even attended a barbecue at Adam's house and met his family, learning that he was married with 3 children, the youngest being just 2 years old. As I read through their messages, something inside me snapped. My emotions transformed from love for Eve to intense hatred, and then to a complete numbness, not just towards her, but towards everything and everyone. I felt utterly disconnected. I took screenshots of the messages and went to bed, but sleep eluded me. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, while Eve grew increasingly angry the next day for leaving without waking her. She complained about neck pain from sleeping on the couch all night, but I wasn't really listening. It felt as though the world around me had been muted, the volume turned down, and I was left in a state of shock, barely able to process how little I seemed to care. During breakfast, I remained silent, while Eve and our daughter chatted away, seemingly oblivious to the drastic change in me. I didn't feel like myself at all, more like a stranger wearing the skin of the old me. As days turned into weeks, I continued with my daily routines, going to work, handling my responsibilities, but something fundamental had shifted. I had become a silent observer in my own life, barely communicating and feeling invisible to those around me. It dawned on me that Eve and our daughter didn't truly love me. Our interactions were minimal unless they needed something from me. They spoke at me rather than with me. This realization hit me hard, bringing waves of pain that would sometimes overwhelm me entirely. I was far from okay. After enduring this silent struggle for 5 days, Eve finally noticed something was wrong during dinner. I had barely spoken a few words to her and our daughter during that time. When she asked if something was wrong, I could only muster a confused expression and continued eating, leading her to believe I was fine. The following day, unable to face work at the local power company where I repaired power lines, I packed up some belongings along with my camping and hunting gear. Without a concrete plan, I wandered around the neighborhood until I found myself back at the kitchen table, waiting for Eve to return home. She arrived with groceries, immediately starting to recount her day while unpacking. I sat there in pain, barely acknowledged as she and our daughter turned their backs on me, engrossed in trivial conversations about sales and everyday matters. The sense of rejection was overwhelming. I felt completely invisible, as if I didn't exist or wasn't worth acknowledging. Reflecting on our life together, I realized that they never truly cared about me. I had been an accessory to their lives, a convenient prop rather than a cherished family member. The pain surged through me, bringing me to tears, but they didn't even notice. Frustration and anger bubbled up inside me. With a glass of water before me, I stood up and threw it forcefully against the tiles over the sink. The glass shattered, shards scattering everywhere. Eve and our daughter turned around, anger etched on their faces, frozen in shock as they took in my tear-soaked appearance. The room fell into an uncomfortable silence before I finally spoke up, confronting Eve about her affair with Adam. My voice was strained, jaw clenched so tightly it hurt. Our daughter looked on, confused and hurt by the unfolding scene. Eve attempted to explain, offering brief apologies before turning back to our daughter, who was already agitated. It was as if my presence didn't matter at all. After witnessing their escalating argument, I couldn't stay any longer. I walked out of the house and got into my car, watching them argue through the window until they didn't even notice I had left. For a few more minutes, I sat there, feeling utterly alone and disconnected from my family, before finally driving away. The days that followed were a blur. I tried to come to terms with everything that had happened, but progress was slow. I spent most of my time staring at walls, battling thoughts of ending it all. Eve's older brother, Bob, a police officer, arrived unexpectedly a few days later. He attempted to interrogate me, but I remained silent, refusing to engage. He declared that I was under arrest and handcuffed me, but instead of taking me to the station, he brought me back home. In the living room, Eve and our daughter immediately began berating me, condemning me for causing them so much worry. I stayed silent, listening in disbelief as they unleashed their anger. Finally, Eve screamed at me to say something. I looked at her calmly and declared that I had nothing to say. This infuriated Bob, who then violently slammed me against the wall, yelling at me for disrespecting his sister. Strangely, his aggressive reaction gave me a sense of satisfaction. Despite his actions, deep down, I knew Bob was a good man, someone who always went the extra mile to help others, even though his own marriage had fallen apart because of his unwavering dedication to helping the homeless. My own struggles had driven me to a point where I couldn't recognize the person I once was. Months passed, and I found myself confined in a psychiatric facility after a severe reaction to medication. The doctors diagnosed me with emotional and psychological trauma, likely depression, and mild PTSD. My behaviors, such as laughing during traumatic events and extreme isolation, were clear indicators of my fragile mental state. In the hospital, I made the difficult decision to sever ties with my family entirely. I wrote letters to each of them, explaining my reasons for leaving and setting firm boundaries to protect my newfound peace. I sold my possessions, traded my car for a small RV, and embarked on a life of solitude, becoming almost a ghost in society. I focused on survival, hunting, fishing, and scavenging to sustain myself, living minimally and avoiding unnecessary interactions. This new way of life brought me a sense of freedom and contentment that I hadn't felt in years. I no longer felt used or unappreciated. Instead, I was invisible to the world, finding solace in nature and the simplicity of my existence. Over time, I began to rebuild my life, maintaining only a P.O. box for mail and renting a safety deposit box for my valuables. I became proficient in living off the land, brewing my own beer, and enjoying the tranquility of my secluded home. My physical health improved as I spent more time outdoors, and I developed a small circle of friends who shared my interests in hunting and fishing. Although I didn't know what had happened to Eve and my daughter, or whether I was legally divorced or owed child support, I found peace in my independence. My father occasionally reached out, but I kept my distance, choosing to focus on my own healing and growth. The loss of my old life was still something I grieved, but I realized that what I was mourning was a fantasy, a memory of a family that, in reality, never truly cared for me as I had believed. Every now and then, I'd visit bustling places like shopping malls or train stations, observing the people around me. I saw men like I used to be, sacrificing themselves for society and families that didn't appreciate their efforts. These men worked tirelessly, enduring endless pressures and sacrifices without any gratitude or recognition. They tried to fool themselves into believing that their sacrifices mattered, just as I had tried to ignore the reality of my own situation. Seeing their empty stares, something deep inside me resonated. I recognized that same emptiness I once felt. Sharing this has been a way for me to unburden myself, to let out the pain I've carried for so long. Remember to subscribe, like, and share to support my channel as we continue this journey together. Recently, I had to make a significant update. The struggle to abandon my family has taken a toll on me, and I wanted to express my gratitude for all the feedback and comments I've received. Unfortunately, I won't be able to respond to everyone due to the sheer volume of messages and the personal nature of the stories shared. Many comments were filled with sadness and criticism, much of which was justified. As I was reading through these messages, I began experiencing something similar to the day I confronted Eve. The world felt muffled, and I felt an overwhelming sense of disconnection. Realizing that I needed help, I reached out to a hunting friend who promptly came to my aid, confiscating my ammunition out of concern. He contacted my father, and together, we moved to a different city to seek medical assistance. Shortly after, I was committed to a psychiatric facility, where doctors diagnosed me with emotional and psychological trauma, likely stemming from depression and mild PTSD. My symptoms included numbness, a strong desire to isolate myself, and bizarre reactive behaviors like laughing during traumatic events. The medical team advised that running away or leaving the facility would be detrimental to my recovery, so I complied with their instructions. In an unexpected turn of events, Bob somehow found my posts and reached out to me with an apology. It turned out that Eve hadn't been entirely truthful about the reasons behind my departure. She had only mentioned the shattered glass incident. Bob revealed that he had informed his superiors about his actions, leading to his suspension and mandatory anger management training. He had prepared a full written confession and all necessary paperwork for me to file a formal complaint against him. However, he warned that if I chose not to pursue the complaint, he would be allowed to continue his job with a pay cut and demotion. Unsure of what to do, I decided to focus on my own healing for the time being, feeling broken and lost, needing to prioritize my mental health above all else. In a subsequent update, I shared that despite receiving an overwhelming amount of support through private messages, I still couldn't respond to everyone due to limited internet access during my hospital stay. The intense distress caused by reading some of the comments led to my temporary disconnection from the online world. Since being released from the facility on Friday morning, I've been undergoing daily therapy sessions and am gradually stabilizing. My daughter is doing well, although our relationship is still healing. She has moved in with my brother and his family, where she's receiving therapy and getting along well with his children. Eve has moved out and is living with her parents, struggling to find her footing after losing her job and dealing with the consequences of her actions. I've decided to sell our house and downsize to a tiny home closer to nature, aiming for a simpler, less stressful life. My daughter is supportive of this idea and has been researching tiny homes diligently. Meanwhile, Adam, Eve's affair partner, is attempting to reconcile with his wife while completely cutting ties with Eve. I've also found a lawyer to begin divorce proceedings as soon as possible. The affair completely broke me and my family apart. The harsh comments and feedback from Reddit played a crucial role in helping me accept that something was seriously wrong with me. I wouldn't have sought help if I hadn't been pushed to my breaking point by the overwhelming negativity. Holding myself together by convincing myself I was doing better was a facade. In reality, I was barely holding on by a thread. Thank you all for being there during this darkest time. In another update, I shared more about Bob. I contacted his employer and completed his case, ensuring he faces the consequences of his actions. Bob admitted that his behavior was completely out of line and apologized for losing his composure. Despite his aggressive actions, I recognize that he is fundamentally a good person who goes above and beyond to help others, even sacrificing his own happiness in the process. Witnessing his genuine remorse and dedication to helping the homeless reaffirmed my belief that he was not a bad man, just someone who lost control in a moment of intense emotion. After over 6 months of struggling, I'm finally beginning to rebuild my life, taking solace in the knowledge that someone like Bob continues to do good in the world despite our tumultuous encounter. Fast forward to a 4-month update, I've continued to receive immense support through private messages, which has been incredibly uplifting. My therapy sessions have helped me achieve a degree of stability, and my daughter is thriving. Although I'm a different person now, I've embraced my solitude and maintain a low public profile. The house is sold, and my daughter and I now live in a tiny home nestled on a forested hillside, complete with 2 separate bedrooms and a spacious porch that offers a breathtaking view. The tranquility and proximity to nature have been healing for both of us. The divorce is nearly finalized, with an expected completion within 3 months. Eve has been pleading for a second chance, but she hasn't demanded anything from me. She owns up to her affair and has taken responsibility for her actions. Through mediation, she has offered to give me everything, including full custody of our daughter, as long as she's allowed to visit regularly to rebuild her relationship with her. She's even offered to help with household chores, but I've chosen to maintain boundaries to ensure that I don't feel indebted to her. Our relationship has been reduced to co-parenting, and I've insisted on split custody to facilitate a smoother transition post-divorce. My daughter and I have grown closer through this ordeal. She's intelligent and perceptive, and I believe she has forgiven me for my absence. She watches closely how I interact with her mother, and I'm committed to being the best father I can be moving forward. Eve has sought counseling, and we're all participating in family therapy to support our daughter's well-being. My determination to make amends for my past mistakes drives me to be a positive role model for her. Reflecting on my journey, I realized that posting my struggles on Reddit was a turning point. The feedback and support I received played a vital role in helping me recognize the severity of my situation and seek the help I desperately needed. It's been an incredibly challenging process, but I'm finally starting to find stability, even though my family and marriage are no longer intact. In the end, we will all be okay, and I'm grateful for the support that helped me reach this point. Thank you all once again for being part of my journey.